Hello and welcome to the explanation from the BBC World Service. This is where we press pause on the busy 24-hour news cycle and dig a bit deeper behind the headlines.
Today the West Bank's nightmare started coming true.
Protesters were throwing bricks in there, using bamboo poles to smash vehicles.
It's a city where mothers carry guns, along with their groceries.
The spaces that people can run to for safety are shrinking every day here.
I'm Claire Graham, and with the help of my BBC colleagues around the world, I'll be trying to get a better understanding of the stories that matter to all of us. Today, Taiwan and China. What is Beijing's claim over Taipei, and how far would it go for reunification? In a speech in October 2021, China's President Xi Jinping vowed to fulfill his country's unification with Taiwan.
Unification is the hope of all Chinese people. If China can be unified, all Chinese will enjoy a happy life. If China can't unify, everyone will suffer.
I'm joined today on The Explanation by the BBC's correspondent in Taiwan, Cindy Su. Hello, Cindy.
Hello.
Beijing sees the island of Taiwan as part of its territory. Why is that?
The two sides were one country at one point during the Qing dynasty, but the Qing dynasty lost a war to Japan, the first Sino-Japanese war. So Japan took Taiwan as a colony. And after the end of the Sino-Japanese War in 1945, the two sides of China, the communists and the nationalists, continued to fight in what was a bloody civil war. The communists won and the nationalists lost. The nationalists fled to Taiwan. So the two sides, the mainland and Taiwan, became divided again, ruled separately. And this is seen by the Chinese government and a lot of the Chinese people as a national shame. So they see the reunification of Taiwan with the mainland as the ultimate dream of the Chinese people.
Prior to its defeat in the Chinese Civil War, the nationalist Kuomintang, or KMT, had been the ruling party in the country. Forced into exile in Taiwan, the KMT established martial law on the island under its leader, Chiang Kai-shek.
When the Kuomintang took over in 1945 and actually moved over its government, military, and businesses over in 1949 with 2 million people, including civil servants, military personnel, and businesses. At that time, Taiwan only had about 6 million people. So you can imagine that transformed the island. Taiwan was in shambles. The economy was devastated. There was an anti-government uprising in 1947, which was violently suppressed, with an estimated 18,000 people or more killed. And that led to nearly 4 decades of martial law being imposed, with many thousands jailed or executed. And resentment over this period of history, over the government's handling of the anti-government sentiments at the time, still lingers to this day. And that's very much part of the obstacles, I guess, to having good relations between mainland China and Taiwan.
The founder of the ROC, the Republic of China, as the Taiwanese call themselves, is honoured for giving his new nation discipline and purpose. From scratch and with few natural resources, the Taiwanese, in less than 2 generations, have brought about an economic miracle. In the development zone outside Kaohsiung, for instance, there's a port, dockyard, shipyard, scrapyard and steelworks, side by side and coordinated according to a national plan. A country the size of Wales has become the 14th richest trading nation in the world.
What helped was they brought, a huge gold reserves from mainland China. So that helped to stabilize Taiwan's economy. What also helped was that they embarked on a massive economic growth agenda, which involved, building 10 major projects called the 10 major constructions under President Jiang Jingguo, the son of Chiang Kai-shek. Besides infrastructure, these projects included building the high-tech industry, which now is one of the biggest in the world. And also, it carried out a very successful land reform program, which gave land to tenant farmers and compensated landlords, who then used the money to start businesses that helped to industrialize Taiwan.
When Chiang Kai-shek died in 1975, his son Jiang Jingguo took over the leadership of the Kuomintang and became president of Taiwan in 1978 and again in 1984. Jiang Jingguo oversaw a relaxation of the authoritarian regime on the island and encouraged the promotion of native Taiwanese to positions of political power, most notably Li Denghui, who would become president in 1988.
He was a crucial figure in helping Taiwan become a democracy. Born in Taiwan, and when the Kuomintang came over, the Kuomintang initially controlled Taiwan using many of its people who came from mainland China. But under President Jiang Jingguo, he began a period of localization in which he promoted people like Li Denghui into government, hoping to sort of reduce the resentment by the local people and legitimize his government in Taiwan. And Li Denghui was very sympathetic to the then grassroots democracy movement at the time. And it was his decision to allow for elections to be held based on universal suffrage, the first ever presidential elections to be held in 1996.
The threat is not an abstract one. These communist military exercises depict the invasion of an island not unlike Taiwan. The government in Beijing has repeatedly refused to rule out the use of force against what it regards as a renegade province. In the old days, when Taiwan was a one-party state, both sides were happy to engage in a war of words, knowing that the position of neither was really threatened. But with the advent of democracy in Taiwan, pro-independence voices are rising. Add to this domestic political uncertainty in China, and there is a radically changed equation.
Unnerved by Taiwan's first island-wide democratic elections in 1996, China once again raised the prospect of a military intervention by firing missiles across the island. Taipei looked to Washington for support.
When China was doing missile tests in the Taiwan Strait, the U.S. sent the biggest armada of warships to Asia since Vietnam War. Under the American policy, which has been adopted for decades, it's called the Taiwan Relations Act. America has only agreed to provide the arms, defenses, weapons for Taiwan to defend itself. It has never actually committed to coming to Taiwan's defense. But we have seen throughout the past few decades, whenever there were tensions, really high tensions in the Taiwan Strait, the U.S. has sent warships over here.
This was Taiwan's answer to Chinese threats, a sweeping victory for the man Beijing loves to hate. At President Li's victory rally, the most powerful emotion was one of national pride. He told the cheering crowds it was the most valuable moment in their history. Let me pay tribute to the millions who are champions of democracy, he said. Let us swear solemnly we will defend forever the road of democracy. This was a loud no to unity with communist China, and some may see it as a vote for confrontation with Beijing. For many, this was Taiwan's coming of age.
There are several factors that allow Taiwan to transform itself from a one-party government to a multi-party democracy and a thriving democracy today. And one of the key factors was that there was already a grassroots democracy movement. In fact, some would say there was a yearning for democracy and self-rule for 100 years since the Japanese took over Taiwan in 1895. So there were already calls for democracy, there were already activists, there was already forces in Taiwan society. And there were protests, there were democracy lawyers being arrested. So there was a lot of pressure on the government at the time to transform itself. At the same time, there was also U.S. pressure because Jiang Jingguo realized that the U.S. was going to be Taiwan's most important security ally and most important country to lean on for weapons, for security, for even economic aid. And he realized to win over the Americans, he really had to allow Taiwan to march towards democratic reforms.
In 2000, Chen Shui-bian of the Democratic Progressive Party was elected as Taiwan's first non-Kuomintang president. 8 years of DPP rule came to an end when the KMT's Ma Ying-jeou was elected president in 2008 with a promise to improve cross-straits relations.
He accepted a compromise agreement known as the 1992 Consensus, which some would say is ingenious. The two sides agree that there is only one China, but each side is free to define what that China is. So that means the mainland can define it as the People's Republic of China, China's official name, and Taiwan can define it as the Republic of China, which is the island's official name.
This outing round the sights of Taiwan is for journalists from Communist China. It's the first time any have been allowed to come here and describe the breakaway island firsthand. Hosted by their Taiwanese colleagues, it's all bonhomie and one big happy family.
We saw a period of dramatically improved relations between the two sides. For instance, we went from just a few thousand Chinese tourists coming to Taiwan to some 4 million Chinese tourists coming every year. So we saw this kind of flowering of relations. And to many people, that actually is necessary for the two sides to reduce tensions and to eventually build towards a permanent peace.
The politics of Taiwan became increasingly polarised between the pro-unification Pan-Blue coalition led by the Kuomintang or KMT and the pro-independence Pan-Green coalition led by the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party. The independence movement continued to draw support from Taiwan's younger population, and when university students occupied the Legislative Yuan to prevent the ratification of a cross-strait service trade agreement, it became known as the Sunflower Student Movement.
For 3 weeks, the students gave a sizable portion of this population hope. These people fear that this trade agreement could give Beijing too much influence over Taiwan. But it remains to be seen whether the main goal for the movement will be achieved, and that is to create checks and balances in Taiwan's political system, so that the people of Taiwan, not just the ruling party, will decide what kind of relationship Taiwan has with China.
The Sunflower Student Movement and other young pro-independence activists played a major role in the historic election victory of the DPP's Tsai Ing-wen in 2016's presidential election.
What has happened in Taiwan tonight is nothing short of a political earthquake. The small, bespectacled woman shaking hands on stage has just been elected Taiwan's new president, and by a huge margin. Tsai Ing-wen is a British-educated law professor, but to China, she's a threat. Today's victory shows the whole world Taiwanese people are free, she says. Taiwanese people are democratic. And as president, I will make sure no one needs to apologize for that. To Beijing, those are fighting words. Tsai and her passionate young supporters want the world to see Taiwan as an independent, democratic country, not as part of China.
One China, one Taiwan! Taiwan is a country! It's my country! Yeah!
She has rejected this 1992 consensus, this compromise agreement. She and her party believe that the agreement is not workable. They don't trust China, basically, and they don't believe that China will continue to allow Taiwan to function independently under this agreement. But behind their rejection is also this resentment of the KMT and the ROC coming to Taiwan at the end of World War II. The core supporters of the DPP, they don't want Taiwan to be the Republic of China. That's why they don't want President Tsai Ing-wen and the DPP to accept the 1992 consensus. They actually want to create a new country called the Republic of Taiwan.
What you're saying is that they lean towards this eventual official independence from China.
Right, but officially they never say that, and that's what makes reporting on Taiwan and actually understanding this issue so difficult, because it's too dangerous for them to outright say, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create an independent Taiwan. So, in interviews with foreign media or, in talks with US officials, they don't really admit that that's what they're doing, but many people believe that that's the ultimate goal. And about 30% of Taiwanese people, based on government surveys, do support eventual or immediate independence. But a majority of the population, according to the surveys that have been conducted year after year, actually just want to maintain the status quo, which is de facto independence, accepting that Taiwan is already functioning as an independent country in all but name. It has its own military, it has its own parliament, it has its own president, and it has its own system of government, because they know that the threat of war with China is very real if they declare formal independence.
Forget the stiff communist formality of China's state media. This is election coverage Taiwan style.
Actually, me and all my friends think we are Taiwanese. No one sees themselves as Chinese.
It's a sentiment Taiwan's president, once struggling in her bid for re-election, is now using to her advantage with a simple message.
Is Taiwan's democracy really under threat, or are you fear-mongering for political gain?
No, this is absolutely no political gain here. It's a real threat. China is here everywhere, and its influence is here as well.
And why has it been so central to this campaign, though?
Because of the lesson we learned from Hong Kong.
Beijing's crackdown in Hong Kong in 2019 on protests against the proposed extradition of dissidents to China may have fueled fears that China will eventually attempt to seize Taiwan by force. And President Tsai Ing-wen made this a prominent issue in her successful campaign for re-election the following year. But just how realistic a prospect is this?
Well, that's a very important question, and I don't think anyone except Xi Jinping and his close aides would know the answer. There is no timeline set by China to reunify with Taiwan. Although Xi Jinping has often talked about achieving the China dream, and unification is part of that dream. I think many analysts believe that it's too risky for China to invade Taiwan and take it back by force. So China is working on a very long-term goal of eventually unifying, but it's hoping to do it peacefully. At the same time, it sees Taiwan growing increasingly distant from China and becoming increasingly closer to the US. If it feels so alarmed that Taiwan will move towards independence, there is the possibility that Beijing might change its mindset and might see a military solution to this problem as the only solution.
You've been listening to The Explanation on the BBC World Service with me, Claire Graham. My guest today was the BBC's correspondent in Taiwan, Cindy Su. And if you'd like to hear more episodes, including an exploration of the campaign for democracy in Hong Kong, then hit subscribe now on BBC Sounds.